Okay, guys, I'm really learning a lot about QuickTime and videoing today. It's very exciting. I'm sorry it's so broken up, but there's really not a pause button if you need to get up and go to the bathroom when you're recording. So I'm learning a lot today about media. So thanks for being my guinea pigs. So we just ended our conversation about cultural competence and how our own personal cultural competence affects the care that we provide to our patients. I talked about how um, we have our own individual stereotypes about cultures. And what I find so interesting is I worked at UMC. I worked with a variety of different people, white, black, purple polka dotted, orange, yellow. In my time there, I worked with new young people, millennials. I worked with Generation X, Generation Y, and we all have our own unique individual stereotypes. And it doesn't really matter about the color of your skin because I stereotyped white people just the way that my African American nurse would stereotype other African Americans. When we label people as, oh, they're redneck, backwoods, country, ghetto fabulous, all of those things, when we have those stereotypes, it really does affect the care that we provide. The important part about culturally competent care is realizing that you have those stereotypes and making sure that you don't allow them to affect the care that you provide. Just because our patient is ghetto fabulous and, fits into that stereotype doesn't mean that they need to get less care. Just because a patient looks like us and talks like us and comes from our same cultural background doesn't mean that they need to get better care. Um, we have to make sure that we treat everyone the same. And that goes for us too, specifically y'all, where you are. Y'all are sophomores and juniors. Y'all are the leaders of our high school, and the underclassmen look to y'all to know how to act and how to treat others. And I laugh because dealing with high school students is not a lot different than dealing with adults. Surprisingly, I hate to be the bearer of bad news. But the same issues that y'all deal with in high school are going to follow you all the way through your life. I mean, people gossip, people treat people unfairly, people are not kind sometimes. The only difference is by the time you get to be my age, you are comfortable enough having a conversation with someone and telling them in a very polite way that you don't appreciate things. But anyway, I forget where I was going with that tangent. Oh yeah, that's right. Y'all are leaders in our high school. Y'all, people perform to the expectations that they're given. And if it is an expectation that waving your Trump flag at a Germantown High School football game is appropriate, then people are going to perform to that expectation. If people perform to the expectation and they see others being mean or hateful to our super mavs, others are going to emulate those behaviors. So you as a student really do lead the way in your own little Germantown high school culture. And it's important for us to be aware of what personal stereotypes that we have. And when we treat other people different based on our own beliefs and our own prejudices, so that we can stop, assess why we're doing that, and make changes in our behavior. So that's something that you learn over time. So I challenge each of y'all, even though you're not in the hospital setting, you're not providing care every day to patients, you are providing care at a certain level to your peers. So I challenge y'all to be aware of when you see yourself feeding into a stereotype or a prejudice that you have based on how you interact with your other peers. Okay, so we're talking about cultural competence right here. This slide, I believe it is slide number 5. And just how we Let's see, let me get my PowerPoint up to date to look at my speaker notes. Developing cultural competence allows systems and agencies and groups of professionals to function effectively, to understand the needs of groups of people and groups that we are providing care to, and thus it eliminates healthcare disparities and ultimately um, and ultimately health disparities. When we are aware that we have prejudices and that we are not informed about a culture, and gaining that cultural competence really does make us be better healthcare providers. It helps us be better people. Anytime that you get the opportunity to travel internationally, specifically overseas to India or anywhere on the continent of Africa, um, in South America and Central America, I mean, even out west, even up north. I mean, any opportunities you have to travel, it really does open up your eyes and makes you more comfortable with different populations. I am very comfortable uh, providing care to Muslim patients because I met and I spent time with Muslim people. Their Punjab and their robes don't scare me anymore like they used to, or make me uncomfortable like they used to. Meeting Muslim clerics and leaders in the Muslim congregation and learning that they are people just like us, even though they look different, and that it's very easy to fall into those social stereotypes that we have about Muslims, specifically in America post 9/11, and now that we have all of the ISIS conversations and different, you know, homebound or homeborn terrorists here in America. You know, it's very easy for us to allow that media content and those media opinions to influence how we treat others. Not necessarily how we treat others, but how we feel towards others, and how we feel ultimately affects the care that we provide. Um, and so it's important, I feel, for y'all to have the opportunity to travel abroad if at all possible, or even not even traveling abroad, going into downtown Jackson and working with homeless populations, or ministering to those who aren't able to have insurance, and seeing that it's not just low income people who don't have insurance. It's everybody. It's upper class. It's people that we work with. It's people that we live with. It's people that we play football with, um, that have health disparities. Those cultural opportunities are so important to your growth as a person. So it's really important to have those opportunities to volunteer with people who don't look and talk just like you. Okay, so I'm stepping off my soapbox. I'm so sorry about that. Moving on to cultural competency and how you become culturally competent. That travel, that volunteering is very important to maintaining cultural competent care. Knowing what your values are. Right now, where you are, it's very easy to adapt and adopt your parents' political views, religious views, social views. As you grow and go off to college, you realize that maybe your parents' views aren't necessarily really how you feel. And so that development of your own personal value set is an interesting part of growing up. You can conduct your own cultural assessment, just looking inside and realizing, do do I have prejudices? Do I have an assumed set of beliefs about certain populations? Knowing and being aware that you have those is half the battle. It's important to be open to your own self and your own set of beliefs, to really understand where it is that you can grow and areas that you need to learn about. Let's see. Um, I love this slide because it says adapt to diversity. It's easier said than done, but it's very important because that will be everything that you have to do in life. You can attempt to surround yourself with people that look like you and talk like you and have the same set of values. But the reality is, once you get out into the workforce, even in college, Your freshman year of college, especially if you go to a big university, Ole Miss State, you are going to be around possibly a majority of people that look like you and act like you, but there are always going to be people who don't. So it's really important and interesting to be open to learning about those people that don't look like you and talk just like you, and go to the Baptist church with you, or have that same group of friends. Okay, so our next slide, it's going to be slide 6, is cultural competency. And these are just some ways that you can really look and understand what cultural competence is. It's important to respect a patient's health beliefs. It's important to have a shifting model of understanding of the patient experience, as in, it's not all about you. It's not. It's about our patient and the care that we're providing. So it's important to have a shifting model of understanding of the patient experience. You learn something new every day in healthcare. You learn something new about yourself, about your patients, about providing care, and just being open to that. The ability to elicit a patient's explanation of an illness and its causes. Just because we know what causes C. diff, diarrhea, doesn't mean that the patient understands or believes that. Some cultures believe that illness is retribution for sin, is a way for the universe to equalize itself. And there are different things that are different views of our own that we need to be open to and make sure that we're on the same page when we're talking to our patient. Ability to explain to a patient the healthcare provider's perspective of illness and its perceived causes. Again, you have to be able to verbalize what you know, what you see as truth as far as healthcare and the pathophysiology of an illness and the causes of an illness to patients who don't necessarily believe that exact way. Being able to negotiate a mutual, agreeable, safe, and effective treatment plan. Just because you feel that something needs to be done a certain way doesn't mean that your patient does. So you have to really be open to discussing things with them and coming to a mutual understanding. I just messed up my PowerPoint slides. Okay. For instance, I'm going to pull back from my teenage years, though it's been quite a few. I didn't really like it when my parents told me what to do. For instance, I was dating a guy, his name was Jason. My parents didn't like him at all, felt he was a bad influence. And they said, "You're not going to date him." And I said, "Okay." No, I said, "Whatever." And so it's really funny. Jason and I dated off and on my last 2 years of high school and my first 2 years of college. And my parents weren't aware. Every so often, my mother would be sneaky. Back in the day when you had paper billing with your cell phone, you could see what numbers were dialed. And I got real sneaky about it. You can buy phone cards for super cheap. Anyway, it wasn't my idea, and I didn't understand. And I said, "Well, whatever," and continued to date Jason on and off for 4 years. Ultimately, I realized that my parents were right. Can't get that time back. But not until it was that I understood why, and that it was my decision to not date Jason anymore, did I really do what my parents wanted me to do. You're thinking about that situation in your life right now that your parents are trying to make you do that you're like, "Oh, no, don't think so." It's the same way with patients. If we have a patient that doesn't buy in to what we're telling them or doesn't believe what we're telling them or think it's a good idea, they're not going to do it. Our patients with diabetes, when we say, "Hey, you can't eat chitlins and mashed potatoes and greens at every meal, you need to do low carb, high protein, low fat," until they buy in and understand why it's important, they're not going to do it. Same way with you and your parents, them trying to be good parents for you and make you productive citizens, and not waste your life away with a loser boy. Um, I really probably need to call my mom and tell her she was right and thank her. Hmm. Anyway, so that's the same way it is with our patients. We have to come to a mutual understanding when we're developing a plan of care for them, when we're trying to help them be better. It's the same way with y'all and your parents. So, being aware of cultural competence and that communication piece is very important. So, moving, I want to tap my next on my video camera, but I can't because it's not going to do anything. So our next slide is going to be, I don't know, slide 7 talks about cultures and what actually is culture. Culture is a set of values or beliefs, attitudes, language, symbols, rituals, behaviors, customs that are unique to a certain group of people. Within the white people, there are different cultures. Within the black people, there are different cultures. Within the Indian or brown people, there's different cultures. Even within the Hispanic population, there's different cultures. Even though they're one ethnic group, there's different cultures within each group. And it's important to be aware of that and be open to that. Culture is typically passed from one generation to the next. Believe it or not, you really are going to turn out just like your mother or your father, unless it's a bad influence. If they're good people, you will, typically. I am my mother's child. I act just like her. Well, I have my dad's personality, but my mom's looks and mannerisms. It's often defined, culture's often defined as a set of rules, and it's typically the foundation and behavior, foundation for behaviors for people. Again, what you hold true and true to yourself and value is what's going to motivate you to act. Okay. So the next slide. This is also very important. Culture is learned, it's shared, it's social in nature, and it's dynamic and constantly changing. I love looking at families who have adopted children from other countries, China, Vietnam, Russia. Those are a whole set of culture in and of themselves. But once they get here and they live with their family, that culture of that family is learned. Just because you're born in China doesn't mean you're going to have Chinese culture. Just because you're born in Nigeria doesn't mean you're going to have those same culture and beliefs. It's learned, and it really is a very environmental thing. And that's an important thing to remember when you're dealing with patients, specifically if they don't look like you and talk like you. Culture is learned. We are products of our environment. And someone who is brought up in a culture that doesn't trust, we'll just say, doesn't trust white people, doesn't trust doctors or nurses, or doesn't trust the institution, the government as a whole, you're going to have to overcome those cultural beliefs in order to provide the best care. Okay, and it's real. There are people who think that all white people are out to get them, or that all black people are thugs and gang members, or that all Indian people own gas stations. It's not true. It's not true, and you have to be open to people having those stereotypes about yourself, about you as a provider and as a person, in order to overcome those. Okay, moving on along. Ethnicity. So let me pull this up. This is a slide that we're on. Ethnicity is a classification of people based on a national region, origin, and or culture. It shares common heritage, typically geographic region, social customs, and language beliefs. There are subgroups, like we said earlier, among the bigger group of culture. Okay. Some common ethnic groups include African American, Asian, European American, Hispanic American, Middle Eastern, Arabic American, and Native American. I love the United States of America because it is such a huge melting pot for people. It's huge. Um, just because you are a certain way doesn't mean that your neighbor's going to be that way. It's a huge melting pot. And that's really why cultural competence in healthcare, just and really as a person, is so very important. Okay. Um, so race is based on physical or biological factors. So you have ethnicity, which is based on where you live and your culture. And then you have your race, which is based off of your physical or biological factors, color of your skin, facial features, blood type, bone structure. I think it's really interesting. I didn't even realize this because I always mark white Caucasian on every survey or every test that I take that asks for my race. Um, but there isn't typically like a Arabic American checkbox. Look the next time that you take a test based and you have to fill out your ethnicity. So there's a group of people that for the 2020 census, that's going to be something that is going to be a choice. So that's really, really important to think about that too. I was watching that article and it talked about how, they weren't Asian and they weren't black and they weren't white. Um, they weren't Hispanic. There wasn't a place for them to mark. So for some, that really does hinder their identity. So it's important to be aware of that. And race cuts across multiple ethnic and cultural groups. So specifically as you grow and you meet new people, you will notice that there are some super dark Indians and some super light people from Nigeria. It just depends. And that's why it's so important not to have those you can have prejudice. It's important not to have them, but it's important to not let them influence how you treat people because you don't know just by looking at someone where they're from. Okay. Let's see. Now we're on to slide, looks like 12. There's differences among people resulting from all these different components of race and culture and ethnicity. And that really influences someone's behavior. Okay. People adapt the values and the behaviors of those they surround themselves with. That's why your parents don't want you hanging out with people who do drugs and have sex inappropriately at a young age, because you typically adapt to the people that you surround yourself with. You also perform to the expectations that you're given. And so that's why culture and ethnicity and being aware of that is so important. Okay. Cultural assimilation. Cultural assimilation is the idea of having a group of people who come from a different country and how they adapt to the ways of a culture. For instance, Assyrian refugees that have come over from Syria, they are now in the process of cultural assimilation. They have come from their country, they've come into our country, and they will adapt and assimilate some of our American beliefs and customs into their culture. It's interesting when you have different subgroups of population. We can use Chinatown in New York or DC or San Francisco or Little Italy. Those are small, compact groups of a certain culture. And if you stay there long enough, you will find that there are certain people in that little subgroup, that little community, that haven't assimilated at all. But they still speak Chinese. They don't speak any English. They follow distinctly their Chinese culture or their Italian culture or their Hispanic culture that they haven't assimilated at all. That they are still in that, and it's a protective mechanism for people, especially when it's scary coming to a new place to live and it's scary coming to a place where you don't understand the language. But for America, we provide a source of hope and opportunity that they don't have in their home country. So it's worth overcoming that fear to come to the United States. But once they get here, it's very easy, just like us. to hang out with people who look like us and talk like us and have the same values, the same for them. So even though different cultures come to America, you can find small pockets of people that they may be on American soil, but they still have their very distinct Chinese or Italian or Mexican or Arabic culture. It's really fun to watch, and as you travel, you'll get to experience some of that. Okay, so now we're moving on to bias, prejudice, and stereotyping. Um, these are things that we really have to be aware of as we provide care. Um, Bias is a preference that inhibits true judgment or open communication. It's a preference that inhibits impartial judgment. Ethnocentricity, believing that my white way is the way to be, which is totally not. Age, we have biases against age. Y'all think I'm crazy because I'm older than you are. I think you're crazy because you're 14. Economics, that's easy to see, specifically in our society. You know, living on the wrong side of the tracks. Y'all may not have ever heard that. But living on the wrong side of the tracks. Oh, they're poor. White trash. Trailer trash. Physical size. Occupation. You know, we put people that are doctors and lawyers on pedestals. And then we downplay those who are in maintenance or custodial work or work in the cafeteria. We do that based on occupation, certain biases. Sexual preference, we stereotype people all the time. And then also with gender, we have specific gender roles that we expect people to play in America. In our Southern culture, you know, the men are going to go out there and hunt and fish and kill food and beat people up to protect us. And the women are going to stay at home and cook and clean and raise babies. But that's really not true. And people that sometimes don't fit into that expected gender role are looked upon as different. Guys who like photography and enjoy looking nice and don't like hunting or fishing and killing stuff are seen as metrosexual or, oh, he's gay. And women who don't want a family, don't care to be married, love their careers and want to flourish in their careers, are seen as awkward and weird and wanting to be men. So cultural and gender stereotypes are real, and it's important for us to be aware of those. Okay, so we're moving on to prejudice, which is going to be slide 15. Prejudice is a strong feeling or belief about a person or subject without reviewing the facts or information, and it's often based on fear. Prejudices that we have towards people are typically based off of fear. We can use the prejudice that some of us have towards Muslim Americans. We see 9/11, we see ISIS, and the fear that we're going to be hurt or harmed can interfere with our openness to that group or population, and it shouldn't be that way. It's important for us to realize when we have those prejudices and work to overcome them. Stereotyping is making an assumption that everyone in a group is the same way. I giggle because I have stereotypes about y'all. I love it when I get to talk with some of my friends and they're like, oh, how's high school going? Because y'all know it's totally not what I'm used to doing. I'm used to managing people and taking care of people. I'm not used to teaching high school students. And I'm like, they're such millennials. And I giggle and I talk about y'all on your cell phones and your YouTube while I'm teaching and your inability to pay attention for more than 5 seconds. And how to y'all it's so important that you have a job that you can drive 6 or 7 different cars. And how, oh, they just don't know how life is. We all have stereotypes. Y'all have stereotypes about teachers. Y'all think we're all out to get you and that none of us care and we want your lives to be miserable. Not really. Not really. I promise. I promise. So stereotyping is really interesting and it's easy to form, but it's very important for us to be aware of that. Okay. Moving on. Let's see. Oh, everything is dinging. I gotta email message. Sorry. So, bias, prejudice, and stereotypes create barriers to effective relationships. For healthcare providers, we need to avoid acting on those assumptions and feelings because all of our patients deserve the same level of care. And we need to be aware of what our own biases, prejudices, and stereotypes are so that we consider ways to avoid those. For me, specifically when I have an interaction with a family that's negative and I'm like, oh my God, they are such white trash. Or, oh my God, they're so high and white, which is what we in healthcare call patients who have private insurance that are so needy that need like 17 juices, 14 bags of ice, and their kid's really not sick and they're freaking out. That's what we do. I pray. I have to pray. I have to ask the Lord to give me sensitivity to the needs of my patient so that I do not allow my stereotypes to affect the care that I provide. So it's important to know what your stereotypes and biases are so that when you feel yourself starting to play into those, that you know how to stop yourself. Okay, it's really important for life in general too. So understanding cultural diversity, um, cultural and ethnic. Y'all, I can't talk. I've been talking for too long. It says 30 minutes. I'm sorry. Y'all feel free to pause at any time and like go to the bathroom or the vending machine. Okay, well, let's just do that. Let's stop right now. My throat's dry. I need to go refill my water bottle and come back in 10 minutes. If that's okay with Mr. McCool, I'm sorry if y'all have already just taken a bathroom break. If you just take a bathroom break, you can't go to the bathroom. But take a few minutes, get up and stretch, go to the vending machine, the bathroom, and we'll be right back.